The votes are in, but the primary season is not over. Several candidates are now trying to get your attention for runoff elections. We have two of them in our studio, ready to face off in the battle to represent Austin at the Capitol.
I'm grateful that the people of Texas are going to give us a chance.
And a surprise showing in the marquee race in Texas.
Those are not the views of the vast majority of Texans.
Why Republicans say the primary results show signs of weakness for the Democrats. Next on State of Texas. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen in for Josh Hinkle. And going into the Texas primary, we heard a lot about the blue wave. A surge of Democrats at the polls raised hopes of a sea change in Texas politics. But it didn't quite play out that way on Election Day. Democrats had a record early voting turnout. When you add in the numbers from Election Day, the party saw just over 1 million voters in the primary. But again, more Republicans showed up at the polls. Their primary had more than 1.5 million voters. The race that's earning the most attention in Texas this election season is the campaign for United States Senate. The primary set the stage for a battle in November between Republican Ted Cruz and Democrat Beto O'Rourke. Both candidates won their primaries convincingly, but O'Rourke had lower numbers than many people expected. More than a third of Democratic voters chose the candidates running against him in the primary. Senator Cruz, on the other hand, crushed his competition in the Republican primary, earning 85% of the vote and pulling in more than double the number of votes that O'Rourke received. On the day after the vote, Senator Cruz told CNN that the numbers show Texas voters are rejecting O'Rourke's message.
Congressman O'Rourke is running hard to the left. He is embracing positions like open borders, like amnesty. He's embracing positions like aggressive advocacy of gun control and undermining our Second Amendment. Now, those are wonderfully popular positions if you're running for the Senate in New York or Massachusetts or California. But this is Texas, and those are not the views of the vast majority of Texans, and I think that's why you saw the overwhelming election results last night.
For his part, Beto O'Rourke says he's encouraged by the primary results.
So people are getting off the sidelines and into the game. And our strategy of going to each one of the 254 counties, listening to people and making their concerns and their fight, our concerns and our fight is going to work. And the good thing is we have 8 months to continue to work with and listen to the Texans that we want to serve and represent in the United States Senate. And we're doing it without a dime of PAC money, corporate cash, special interest contributions. It's just people, the people of Texas we want to serve and represent.
Recent history has not been kind to Democrats running for Senate in Texas. The last time voters elected a Democrat for the Senate was 30 years ago when Lloyd Bentsen won his 4th and final term. Another big story from the primary, the success of women on the ballot. Right now, just 3 of the 36 members of Congress from Texas are women. But that's likely to change in November. 50 Texas women ran for Congress in the primary. 14 of them won their party's nomination. 14 more advanced to the May runoffs. And one of them is here in Central Texas. Mary Wilson took the top spot in the Democratic primary in U.S. House District 21. She placed ahead of Joseph Kopser, who many people expected to lead the way.
And I do think that my gender was helpful, honestly. And it would be naive or just disingenuous to suggest otherwise. I was the only female candidate on the ballot.
Wilson and Kopser will face off in the May 22nd runoff for the Democratic nomination. Groups like Annie's List recruit progressive women to run for office. I spoke to Executive Director Patsy Woods Martin. She told me more women signed up to run after the election of Donald Trump, and it's happening at all levels of government.
We're seeing greater numbers of women running at the municipal level, at the county level, at the congressional level. We even have a woman running for governor, right?
Martin is, of course, referencing Lupe Valdez. The former Dallas County Sheriff topped the field of 9 candidates in the race for the Democratic nomination for governor. Valdez had a double-digit margin over the next closest challenger, Andrew White. But Valdez did not get the majority needed to win the primary outright, so she'll face the Houston businessman in the May runoff. If Valdez wins, this would be the 2nd consecutive election for Democrats to have a woman running for governor. In 2014, Wendy Davis topped the Democrat statewide ticket. The former state senator from Fort Worth lost to Republican Greg Abbott in the general election. Abbott handedly won the Republican primary on Tuesday. He earned more than 90% of the vote. Campaign finance reports show Abbott has more than $43 million available for his re-election bid. A big question now, who has the advantage coming out of the Texas primaries?
That is a big night for Texas Democrats.
We put the question to our experts with two different takes on the outcome.
There's no doubt that there's a lot of Democrat enthusiasm this cycle, but there was no blue wave.
Plus, voters toss out a longtime Austin state representative. Now there's a runoff to find out who gets on the ballot in November. We're bringing Sheryl Cole and Chito Vela to our studio to face off on the issues for the first time face to face. Coming up on State of Texas. We want to bring you different perspectives on the primaries and what comes next. We're joined by Tyler Norris, a Republican political consultant, and Ed Espinoza, Executive Director at Progress Texas. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
And so, Tyler, we'll start with you when it just comes to who showed up on primary night, Republicans and Democrats. What'd you see?
Well, Republicans showed up despite a couple weeks of coverage where it would seem like there was going to be a blue tidal wave or something like that. Republicans showed up in much larger numbers, ended up outvoting Democrats by, I think, 600,000. And look, there's no doubt that there's a lot of Democrat enthusiasm this cycle, but there was no blue wave.
Ed, when it comes to responding to that, I mean, Democrats didn't perform like expected, did they?
But what did you expect? They turned out more than 100% of what they did in 2014. It was a record-setting night. More Democrats voted on Tuesday in a primary than ever voted before, and the margin was about 500,000. Republicans, on the other hand, had turnout up about 14 or 15%, about 200,000 votes. Democrats were up about 550,000 votes.
And Ed, when it comes to, I guess, the marquee race, Senator Ted Cruz versus Beto O'Rourke, I think a lot of Democratic and a lot of politicos look at O'Rourke underperforming on Tuesday. Was that?
You know, in the words of Joe Kennedy, he'll have all the money you need for an election, but I'm not going to finance a landslide. And in this race, Beto got 60% of the vote. He didn't spend any money. He didn't need to spend any money. If he would have spent a ton of money in the primary, it would have been for vanity. He's smarter than that. The other thing is he needs to drive turnout up in the big cities like Houston and Dallas. He did great in Austin, but Houston and Dallas are going to be really important for him in the midterms. And then beyond all that, he ran against someone whose last name is Hernandez. And in the border counties, that is a big advantage in a primary. In a general election, hopefully a name like Beto will be a better advantage in the general.
And what do you think about that? I mean, is this a long-term competitive race?
If Wendy Davis's performance in 2014 in the Democrat primary was a disappointment, then Beto's performance on Tuesday night was a reoccurring nightmare for Democrats. I mean, if you just look at the map, he lost all along the border, he lost along the coast, he lost to a guy named Edward Kimbrough, which I think, was he a postal worker or a retired teacher?
Never heard of him before.
Well, he lost to him in the Panhandle and then Far East Texas, or Southeast Texas, I should say. I'm not sure where the silver lining for Beto was. But Democrats should be really worried. He visited 226 counties, according to his campaign, during the course of the primary, and people didn't like what they saw.
And when it comes to the state legislature, right, there was a big push from business groups, from educator groups to kind of fight back against the Tea Party, I guess, dominant power right now. Tyler, what did you see from those races where the Tea Party groups were pitted against the business groups, the educator groups?
A lot of money spent, but not a lot of change in the overall picture. I think if you look at who Governor Abbott and Senator Cruz endorsed, Governor Abbott went, by my math, 25 of 27. Senator Cruz went 26 of 29 on election night. So I actually think they did pretty good. I don't think we saw a lot of change. I think we saw conservatives on defense win pretty easily. We saw a couple open seats switch from establishment to conservative, but pretty neutral picture overall.
Ed, do you agree with that? Was this kind of a status quo thing?
I mean, you know, Abbott endorsed a lot of incumbents that were supposed to win, but he also endorsed a couple of challengers, 3 marquee races, 2 of which fell flat, and he didn't go the way he wanted them to. So I think he has some egg on his face for that one. But as far as like the educators and the business groups, you know, the big problem right now with trying to play in a Republican primary, there's the old saying, if you make someone pick between a Republican and a Republican, they'll choose the Republican every time. There aren't a lot of moderate Republicans left. You're seeing Joe Strauss leave the conference. You're seeing others like him leave the conference. There's not a lot of moderates left to pick from. If you want to challenge the establishment and the status quo, you've got to vote in the Democratic Party primary, and that's probably why we saw Democratic turnout increase more than 100% in this primary.
Ed, Tyler, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Change is coming for parts of East Austin and Travis County as voters toss out a state representative who served for more than 20 years. But the primary is not over yet in District 46.
We need to have a champion, a fighter. There's just not a lot of room to compromise at this point.
Two candidates now make the case to win votes in the May runoff.
I haven't just fought against the Republican agenda at the local level on behalf of local control. I've delivered on it.
We're giving you an in-depth look at the candidates as they come to our studio to face off on the issues. That's next on State of Texas. Dukes has served in the Texas House since 1995, but her time in office is about to end. Dukes faced 5 challengers in her district, which covers East Austin and eastern Travis County. The race is going to a runoff, but Dukes won't be a part of it. She finished 3rd behind former Austin Mayor Pro Tem Sheryl Cole and immigration attorney Chito Vela. Those two will compete in the runoff for the Democratic primary. And this morning, we're joined by both candidates here in our studio, Sheryl Cole and Chito Vela. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start with kind of the basic question of a lot of people, a lot of the slogans in this race before the election was, I'm not Donna Dukes. But let's talk a little bit about what will make you different in representing HD 46. So Sheryl Cole, what would representation look like for you specifically, and how would it be different from Mr. Vela?
Well, I've always had a broad coalition of people that I worked with and led on issues such as reproductive rights, marriage equality, workers' safety, comprehensive planning, affordability, and education. So I have that record before sitting on council and after council.
And what would your representation look like, and how would it be different from Mrs. Cole?
Well, my background, I'm an activist, I'm a fighter, I'm a litigator, I'm an attorney, I do criminal defense and immigration work. And I want to take that fighting spirit, that grassroots spirit into the Texas House. It's a Republican-dominated body. Really radical Republicans are controlling the agenda at this point. And so what I want to make sure is that the representative from House District 46 goes in there and is really ready to fight and to push back and to aggressively push the Democratic agenda. We need to have a champion, a fighter. There's just not a lot of room to compromise at this point, and there's not a lot of Republicans that are willing to sit down at the table and compromise with us.
Let me follow up on that, because the House is made up of a coalition, right, of kind of business Republicans and Democrats, and there is kind of that working relationship sometimes on some issues. If you're going to be an advocate fighter on all the progressive issues all the time, how are you going to get things done with maybe the Republicans to bring stuff back home to HD 46?
So there's 2 areas where I believe that a coalition can be formed between Democrats and Republicans. The first is in Medicaid expansion, in health care. Texas has not accepted the Obamacare federal dollars, and that's really hurting urban areas, but it's devastating rural areas. You're seeing rural hospitals close. You're seeing people in rural counties unable to access health care. You're seeing women having to drive 3 hours to go to a hospital to give birth. Rural Republicans need the Medicaid expansion just like urban Democrats do. And I believe that there is a common interest there that we can work together to expand Medicaid. The other area would be education funding. Our urban school districts are really feeling the pinch right now, sending a lot of money back to the state and seeing their per student funding from the state decline. Rural school districts are in the same situation. You're seeing rural school districts drop things like band and theater and are really having to tighten their belt. So again, we both know, rural Republicans and urban Democrats, we need better education funding. And again, in those two areas, education and healthcare, I believe that coalitions can be built between Democrats and Republicans.
And what about yourself? What are the areas where you're willing to make deals to get things done for HD 46, and then what are the areas that you are non-negotiable, you're fighting on this?
I have fought since the day I came into the world. My mother was a maid, my mother's mother was a maid, and I haven't just fought in connection with one issue that expresses democratic values. I have fought in connection with a broad range of issues, including immigration rights, including equality, including the Nathaniel Sanders. So I often resent the idea that I haven't fought, and I don't know if that's because I'm female or not, because I have. And I haven't just fought against the Republican agenda at the local level on behalf of local control. I've delivered on it.
And are there any issues, though, because you are going to have to make deals with Republicans to bring stuff home back to HD 46. They run the show in the Texas House. How are you going to work with them?
I think on a number of issues that we can work together. I have worked for the Texas Municipal League and at the City of Austin, and actually testified against bills that eroded local control where there were Republican members who stood for the same thing. And I think the same thing is true on property tax increases and education funding. We have to take on Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott for their positions in not adequately sending money to Austin and sending $500 million away.
We're going to take a quick commercial break right now, but then we'll be back with both the candidates. And thanks for joining us again for State of Texas. We're here with both of the remaining candidates for House District 46, Sheryl Cole and Chito Vela. We were talking about education just a little bit ago, but now we're going to talk about affordability, the other big issue in the district. And we'll start with you, Mrs. Cole. What are some specific policy ideas that you would like to see implemented that would help your district when it comes to affordability?
I think that we have to form broad coalitions to deal with this issue. And we have to fight against people, Republicans mostly, who are against affordability. When I was on the city council, I led the effort to pass the affordable housing bonds after they failed. And I assembled a broad coalition to do that. And I think that in many of the districts that may actually have a Republican representative, that we can fight them on that issue because they are suffering from affordability, just like District 46.
And is there anything we can do besides the property tax level when it comes to development or specific policy proposals that you would like to see? Because displacement, gentrification, those are huge issues in District 46.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole premise that is creating or reason that we have an affordability problem is the exodus from the city to further and further out. And that gets us into needing to understand and examine our environmental policies. And the TECQ, which is a state agency, and other agencies have been just lax, despicable in terms of enforcement of the environmental policies. And I've worked on those extensively, and that would be important to the district, not only because of the environment, but also because of affordability.
And Mr. Vela, is there anything that you would specifically push to tackle displacement, gentrification?
That is really the most important issue in Austin now. I hear about it when I knock on doors all over the district. That's usually the first thing that people mention, is that this neighborhood is changing so much, and all the neighbors that have been here for decades are being forced to move elsewhere. Sadly, the city councils of the past have not dealt with the issue, and it has gotten out of control now. Housing is not an issue that the state of Texas has traditionally dealt with, but I would look to add funding to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, who has traditionally been responsible for providing housing assistance. We need to get the state more involved in providing affordable housing, because our cities just do not have the resources that they need. And it's not just a problem in this district. If you look at Houston, if you look at Dallas, affordability is starting to be a concern all over the state. San Antonio, a traditionally very affordable city, is also, you're starting to see rents creep up and you're starting to see home prices increase. So although the state of Texas has not traditionally been involved in this area, hopefully we can come together with the other urban areas to provide additional funding for affordable housing, particularly for your very low-income people, your people disabled, on fixed income, Social Security. Those are the folks that are suffering more than anyone else in this rising housing price environment.
Now, really quickly, just because we're trying to differentiate between the two of you, last word for both of you of what is the biggest difference between you and Mr. Vela?
I have actually cast a vote about the Democratic values, and he has not. We are in a campaign. It's fairly easy to say that you will be for those democratic values, but I've had to fight for them too. And I've had to fight for them at the local level, and I've had to fight for them at the state legislature. And I have a record of broad coalitions with all types of people, demographic groups, income levels, and especially the low income. And so I think that is the biggest difference. So in terms of saying there's a difference, there's not so much a difference as there's a lack of any activity to support those values.
And what about yourself? What's the biggest difference between you and Mrs. Cole?
Well, I would point to my experience and knowledge of state government. My first job out of law school, I was an assistant attorney general with the Texas Attorney General's office in the Open Records Division. I'm very familiar with open records laws, and then the Attorney General's office as a whole. And then I worked in the House of Representatives for 4 years, and I know the House, I know the games, I know how they're played. I'm ready to step in with detailed knowledge of the state, its functions, detailed knowledge of the House of Representatives, its functions, and get to work on day one.
Mr. Vela, Mrs. Cole, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's our time for State of Texas. Remember, you can catch us every Sunday morning here on KXAN. Now stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Phil Prazen. Thank you for joining us this morning.